Hello, everybody, and welcome to Behind the Camera. So, here we are with episode 89 of Behind the Camera, and this week my guest is Adele Royce. Adele is the author of book series Truth, Lies, and Love in Advertising, and also The Neon Diaries. Ahead of the release of Adele's latest novel, Slipper Girl, releasing Monday the 2nd of March, we discuss Adele's transition from marketing and PR to fictional writing, her change in genre from romantic dramedies to mystery thriller, and much more. Of course, if you would like to check out Adele's works, including her newest book, Slipper Girl, be sure to check the links in the description. As always, if you'd also like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, all of my links are also in the description, including the pre-order for my upcoming book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, releasing on the 5th of March on Amazon. I'm also on Patreon. For £3 a month, you can get extra behind-the-scenes content, access to an exclusive series where I catch up with old guests, and much more. But now, here's the interview. Adele, welcome to Behind the Camera podcast. Pleasure to have you on the show today. How are we doing?
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
That was my absolute pleasure. So you are a lifelong writer and storyteller, and you've worked in marketing and everything in the Las Vegas Strip. Done a lot in your time. It's amazing to see. So what can you tell us about your background in writing and storytelling? Like, let's go from there first.
Sure. Well, I actually started writing really early. I was probably 7 years old, and I wrote stories. And just in my English classes, it was something that I was really interested in. I was always kind of a daydreamer, which didn't make my parents happy, but I found that quality of, honing in and focusing on observing things was something that I drew on later in my life for fiction. But so I started writing early. When I got to be college age, I chose to be an English major. Again, not very popular at the time, and not a surefire thing of like, oh, what are you going to do after you graduate? But I love English literature. I loved reading and writing and reading of the classics and reading poetry and every type of genre and my marketing career had me writing for a living. So I started in public relations, which had me like writing news releases and like learning different styles of writing. And I moved into advertising, so I was writing ad copy and marketing copy and plans, blah blah blah. I think it was when I left Las Vegas and my lovely adventures on the strip there in marketing for these big corporate hotels, I had the time to really think about creative writing.
Yeah.
And it was I kind of switched sides in my career to the agency side, and so it freed up a lot of my schedule where I could sort of set my schedule. And so I started to write a manuscript probably about 15 years ago. Probably started about 20 years ago, but 15 years ago is when I really started writing the books that would end up being these two series that I have now. But yeah, I mean, and once I started writing fiction, I really had to learn how to write a novel. It's a craft, and I had a lot of mentors and help and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, fiction is my absolute passion now. I love to write stories and tell them. So that's kind of like what the journey was. The short version of it, I guess.
Yeah, of course. And I love that because, like, you say you're a daydreamer, and I think daydreamers make the best storytellers because it's like you already are tapping into your imagination. And like I know for sure when I was a kid I was a daydreamer myself. I was always just like my personal one was like people watching and making up backstories for people just because it was a it killed time. It was just fun to do, and it kept my mind engaged. More importantly, and then it's sort of just fall into. But then you kind of realize as well, like in your case, you're writing in marketing. that's still storytelling as well. It's just sort of how you craft this particular story, and in a marketing perspective, it's really how you sell it, isn't it? Really. So, like going back to your marketing days, especially in Las Vegas, like what was that? What was that like, especially on the Las Vegas Strip of all places? It's very very wild there at times. And what was it like working in marketing there?
It was exactly what you just said, wild. It was so, and I was young and, bright lights, like this sort of crazy. I always, when I first moved there, I drove by the strip and I looked and I thought, gosh, I live in a comic strip. Like this is skyline is not, it's fabricated and crazy, but it's so kind of amazing at the same
Mhm.
time. So it was very exciting for me. It was never, there was, I couldn't predict, especially being in PR early on, it was just stuff would happen and I would have to handle it.
Mhm.
And to your point, telling the story, positioning the story in a way that's going to be positive for the company, because I was always, I was delivering the message for the company, so I was constantly on in the thought, my brain was constantly on, okay, how is this going to sound? How is this going to be perceived? What do I want to say? What do I want to convey? So, again, different kind of storytelling, but crucial in that role because everything you say ends up in the media. And so I was constantly thinking about manipulating the story into what was
Mhm.
going to be, without being obviously delivering your company line, but so there was just a lot of thinking on my feet all the time. There was a lot of creativity to it. I mean, I had fun things. I had like, entertainment, show openings, restaurants, celebrity chefs. I had the gaming part of it in
Mhm.
general, but and then there was the hotel. So there were so nightclubs. I mean, you name it, you were opening things, having events, holding parties. I used to have so much fun. I'm a big music fan. I'm a huge indie rock fan. I would create like a playlist for an event, and I knew that everybody who attended wouldn't even know what it was or care. But I had these ways of like putting my little stamp on things that was so much fun for me. And yeah, so I would say fun. A lot of it was really also a grind. I mean,
Mhm.
24 hours, 7 day a week business, you really don't get a break from that. And, again, probably youth was on my side at that point. But yeah, I would say about working there is just a lot of glamorous, a lot of unglamorous,
Mhm.
a lot of interesting stuff. And, really a background that I can draw on, especially with my new books,
Yeah.
because I set them all in Las Vegas. Isn't that fun?
But like, as a writer, like even the writer of fiction, you have to base certain things off of experience. At least that's a sort of writing technique that I've learned about from chatting to a lot of writers, is that a lot of it stems from personal experience, whether it be events or just places or whatever it may be, just because it's for many different reasons, I suppose. One, because it's a part of your life, and then also like it's a bit easier to write about, and then you can kind of have that creative what if kind of license behind, well, what if this happened in this time when I was here, and a lot of reminiscing as well, I suppose, of a lot of good times.
Absolutely. It's funny because I definitely am a writer who writes what I know.
Mhm.
And I've also written scenes, I've been traveled to different countries and stuff, and I've written scenes based on those experiences. But overall, I've been writing what I know. I mean, my characters are in marketing and advertising. Now they're in the casino business. I know the business. So it does lend itself to creating uh, a realistic and authentic environment in the stories, where I feel people can see, my readers can see. My first three books were set in Los Angeles, where I grew up. And um, I've had readers say, "I've never been to LA, but I feel like I've been there because of the way these books were written and the way these stories were told." So, yeah, there's a lot. And it does make it easier to write in cities and environments and businesses and environments that you know for sure.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, when you were working in marketing, you mentioned that there's different sort of styles of writing in terms of like what it is that you're writing about. Would you say that that helped you find your writing style when it came to fiction as well?
Absolutely. Um, Absolutely. But here's the big difference. We were talking about marketing, PR, and working for a specific company or
Hmm.
corporation where you are really delivering your voice is not necessarily your own at all.
Yeah.
It's like the voice of Adele Royce came out when I started to write the fiction, and I have to say, it was so freeing to have a voice that was my author's voice that was
Yeah.
speaking, and I could say whatever I wanted through my characters. And I've got some crazy characters that I've written, and some of them, most of them are not beyond reproach, except for maybe the children of some of my characters. But yeah, it was really a that's the biggest difference. But having all of that writing experience and being able to use just my own talent that I have, and be able to use it and be versatile enough and nimble enough to use it in different types of media was great. But yeah, when I sat down to write fiction, I really, I really felt like, oh my gosh, I can finally express express my I can hear my voice now, which is it's because you're also an author, but it's
Yeah.
good to have that voice, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And like I like what you said there about excuse me, when you started writing fiction, it's like the voice of Adele Royce came out then, because obviously when you're doing PR marketing, of course you have that kind of freedom to write certain things within reason, but it has to be of the voice of the brand or the hotel or whatever it may be that you're writing for. It has to sound like it's coming from there, that it makes sense. And obviously it's a lot very limiting, in terms of when you're a writer and you just want to tell a story. It's like, well, I've only got these limited resources to do it, but we move, as it were. um so you have then two series of books. You have the Truth, Lies, and Love and Advertising, your romantic dramedy series, made up of Camera Ready, For Position Only, and Princess Smile. And then your second series is a mystery thriller series, The Neon Diaries. So that's quite interesting that you've gone from two different genres there. And what was that like, kind of shifting between them, going from the first series to the second series?
So that's a really great question because it was definitely not easy. It was a full-on adjustment, and Summer's Blood took 5 years to write. That's the book one of the Neon Diary series. But I, it really was determined. I didn't think about the genre
Mhm.
before I conceived of that first book off of the first series. One thing I should say is that when I started with Camera Ready and wrote those 3 books in the first series, I still have the same family. The characters are all connected in the same
Mhm.
universe. So I didn't. I took the story. I took the last book in the series, which technically was for position only, because that was the. I went 2, 3, 1. Princess Smile was the first book I ever wrote, but I released it last. It was like the
Yeah.
prequel, but I took the story, and the story really, the way I was taking it, the route I was going was no longer going to be centered on a relationship between 2 characters. It had to move in a new direction. And the new direction was sort of the what if moment. This happened after For Position Only. And so when I started to write Summer's Blood and I started to realize that the story was so much bigger, and it was so much, there were secrets, and there was this whole revelation that needed to come out in order for my main character to heal basically and
Yeah.
to have the resolution that happened in Summer's Blood. But that's what turned it into a mystery thriller. I didn't think about that until I was like halfway in, I was several chapters in and I'm like, this story's got to be this. And that's what made it more difficult because I was not used to a heavy outline. I but I had to change my ways for this book and write an outline and outline all the chapters and figure out, what was going to happen, when it was going to happen, how to feed these details without giving away the plot too
Mhm.
soon. So it was a very different way of writing for me. And therefore, it took me much longer to eke out and get Summer's Blood uh, where I wanted it. But let me tell you, the book that's coming out on Monday, Slipper Girl, that one really went so much quicker.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether it was because of the story or how I was writing it. It just, and they're both really fast-paced books. I write my books; they're very punchy. I like a lot of action. I like it to happen early. But yeah, I mean, back to your original question, the genre jump was quite. It was a big jump for me. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Like, and was the intention for Summer's Blood for it to be another romantic novel, like sort of similar to the first series, or was it just a matter of having the story out first of all?
Yes. So the story determined kind of the genre that it
Yeah.
ended up in. But what I thought about is that I could, because the first three books in the first series are all about Craig and Jane and their romantic problems but there was a lot of intrigue in those books and they were really, I felt, uh very smartly done. And I mean, I'm saying that about my own books, but I appreciated them for what they were, I
Hmm.
think. And then when I started thinking I can't do anything else to these people's relationship, but what I did is some of that romantic the relationship between these two characters came into play in the book because I was trying to pull that story into this one without making it all about that. So there
Hmm.
are elements of romance actually in all my books. I like to have a touch of that. I don't want to focus on that, but I feel like people like love relationships.
Yeah.
People enjoy for there to be some kind of chemistry or tension among a couple of characters and I feel like it pulls you in and makes them feel real because they're not just experiencing outside things that are horrible things that are happening in these books where there's murders and all kinds of stuff going on. I like to hone in on the characters and their actual lives so
Hmm.
that they do feel three-dimensional in every way.
Definitely. And it is an interesting thing because no matter what the genre, whether it be film, TV, books, whatever, there's always going to be a romantic element to it. There's always going to be a little, whether it's like a sort of will they, won't they, or a bit of a chemistry sort of aspect to it. There is always, no matter the genre outside of romance, there's always that little element of it. And I think it's, it's like what you say. It kind of makes it real. It sort of makes these characters more human and relatable. And empathy is a massive, massive theme. Like every writer I've ever spoke to, empathy is a huge theme, especially when it comes to the writing the characters and their development. It's that like even the bad guys, like even the villains have to have human redeemable qualities because that's just what it is. Because like not to the point even sometimes the point where you're rooting for them in a way to redeem themselves, but like there is just I think that's like a really kind of amazing thing about storytelling is that even though these characters are fiction, the reader is kind of left there thinking, well, this could happen, this could be as real as it gets.
Absolutely. That's actually my favorite part of writing fiction is developing the characters and sketching them because and you said it very well in that like they have to even the villains have to have some kind of relatability or some reason for why they're evil. There's always a backstory to everyone, and that's why, when I write a character, I really dig into who they are and why are they like that.
Mhm.
Why are they like this? Because that's the depth of the character you're writing, and that's going to come out on the page. It's only going to be as deep as I've gone into that character's psyche and been able to pull out. And that's actually how I wrote my new book. I chose a character out of Summer's Blood, and I I had people were very readers were interested in her, and I pulled her out and I thought, why is she like this? She was this kind of a fringe character in Summer's Blood. She was one of my character's daughter, and she was 17. She was really rebellious and irreverent and uh, all kinds of things. And I knew why, but I didn't really understand the enormity of it until I
Mhm.
dug into her and made her my main character. And that was fun because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, this all of this stuff is what made her who she is, and now she's in this situation and trying to overcome all of that. It's fun for
Yeah.
me to do that.
Of course. And that interests me, because like when people write series, a lot of the time they have like the full series planned out, or at least the sort of blueprint of, okay, this, is looking like it's gonna go over 3 4 books, etc., whatever it may be. But from what you said there, it sounds as though Slipper Girl kind of, the idea for it was kind of conceptualized from feedback from readers of Summer's Blood. And is that something that you would normally do for your books, where people pick out a particular character and think, okay, well, I can develop on this? Or would you have like a full series, like, blueprinted in your mind first?
Well, I did not have a full blueprint in mind for
Mhm.
my series. I So always an outline for the book, but not the series, because it's funny. Um, when you put a book out and then I'm conceiving of the next one, because once
Mhm.
the book is out, yeah, I'm marketing it and all that, but I'm conceiving of the next one. And yes, there was some feedback that made me think, wow, this is an interesting character that readers are sort of curious about, and I'm hearing about it a lot. But I wouldn't say that determined what I did with Slipper
Yeah.
Girl. I think it was really kind of, it gave me ideas, and I actually thought about highlighting a different character in Summer's Blood, and I had a different idea of what the story would be. But then when I thought about this other character, the Skylar Van Ness character, who is the pretty much this one of the stars of Slipper Girl, it was so much more interesting. She was
Yeah.
so much more of an intriguing character to me that I'm like, ah, there's so much you can do with this person as opposed to the other character who may have been a little bit more uh, not as what's the word? Not thought provoking, I guess, is what,
Yeah.
is the best thing I can say about it.
So would that be like a, for for writers in general, would that be like a normal kind of technique when it comes to, like, looking into sort of future books? It's, you would sort of have, or pick one character and be like, okay, what could the story be for this one surrounding this, and then you would do that for different characters and kind of imagine what it would be like, and then you go for the best one. Would that be a sort of normal sort of tactic?
Well, I don't know if it would be a normal tactic, because I know all writers are different and
Mm-hmm.
all fiction writers have their own process. And, for me, it really just depends on how the story kind of shakes out.
Yeah.
And so for the book that's going to follow Slipper Girl, usually what I do is because I try to pull new characters in, keep some of the ones who I absolutely love and can't say goodbye to, and who are absolutely like great characters, and I will keep them in. Some of them, like from the first series, that are still on the sidelines in the new series, their parts get smaller
Yeah.
because I'm actually, and also, they're older characters, and I need to move some of the new ones and the younger ones and focus on. And that's kind of how I set up Slipper Girl from Summer's Blood. At the end, I have a scene where the characters are looking at their teenage kids, and they're like, let's let them think about the future. I don't remember, forget what the line was, but I try to do that with every book, knowing that it still is a series, so that I can set up the next story.
Mhm.
And,
Of course.
if that makes any
Yeah,
sense.
absolutely. Yeah, and because this is the thing that fascinates me about fictional writing, and particularly series, because even if you come to the end of a series, like take Truth, Lies, and Love and Advertising, for example, 3 books, that's the series done. But is it ever really truly 100% door closed on it? Because if all the characters that you have, there's always the chance to sort of go back and revisit particular character and be like, well, what could happen with this? And then a spin-off series, for example, could be birthed. And of course, like, to go back to the point on audience feedback, like, I mean, have you ever had people reach out and be like, I would love to have known what goes on with XYZ, this character, after this particular point in the book, because, so maybe that's the end of their character arc in that particular sort of series, or I know I'm talking very, very vague and generic here, but like, if it
Yeah.
makes sense,
So, I get reader feedback. I do a lot of book clubs where
Mhm,
I have readers sitting in front of me, and they're talking about the book, and the characters and what they like, what they dislike. Um, but I've never necessarily heard, oh, I miss so and so. Like,
mhm,
what, you know, um, I haven't really had that happen. I've had a lot of feedback from readers that the characters feel like real, like they
yeah.
care about them and they're their friends, and they don't want the story to end. And I think that that's honestly what keeps me like continuing on with this series, because I don't want them to end. I don't want that. That's why I call my marketing, sort of branding, is World of Adele Royce, because it is its own little world. And when you're in there, there's this family, and it's kind of the same family that I started with, and they are growing, and so these books, while the genre is what, for each of the series is, what they are respectively, it's also a family saga, and I'm
Yeah.
pulling in, and people love this family. They want to know what's going to happen next just as much as I do. Oh, I don't want to disappoint them.
That,
So that, yeah.
it's a good position to be in, though, for sure. And I've heard like that a lot from a lot of writers before, and it's incredible because I love the fact that there is that emotional attachment to these characters that you've developed. And a lot of things that have been brought up to me before are the fact that it's hard to say goodbye to these characters when you're done writing about it. And I know you mentioned that there's a sort of like a crossover in the term the universe of where these books are set, and but obviously when you go from one series to a new series, it's majority going to be all new characters, new setting, new everything. Was it really difficult going from your first series to just be like, okay, this is done here, we're moving on to something new, all these characters, that's it? Was that like a sort of really poignant moment for you before you started writing the Neon Diaries?
That's another great question. Yeah, it was a little weird. Because the first 3 books were set in LA, and these guys kind of have glamorous lifestyles. I mean, not all of them, but
Mm-hmm.
they're like by the ocean. And I had a lot of fun going back and doing my research to LA, and just because it was so much easier. I found that I can't write about a place that I've lived in until I've been distanced from it for a while.
Yeah.
So Vegas was, I never thought I would write about Las Vegas. But once I was done with series number 1, and I thought, well, I really like writing about LA, and this is kind of, I need to, for this book, I'm going to go into Vegas and I'm going to tell some stories that aren't, the glamorous stories of Vegas. I'm going to show you what goes on behind the scenes with this particular group of fictional characters. And I think we talked about this earlier as like writing what you know, but not necessarily bringing in the headline, so to speak. You're putting these fictional characters in a fictional casino hotel and they're working there. Okay, one of them is the CMO and I know marketing, so I can write
Mm.
that that character's, what he or she is experiencing from firsthand knowledge. But really what you're doing is taking these characters and putting them in situations that could happen.
Yeah.
They could be real. They could, and in this particular world, this is what's going to happen. But it was kind of tough for me to go from, this sort of lighter romantic dramedy books where it was all about the relationships and work and this and drama. But now I've got some really gritty stuff happening. I've got, a murder. I've got, organized crime in the background. I've got, a lot of family secrets that are going to unravel these people's lives and hurt them. And, so I'd say all of that was quite a bit of a jump. And I had to let go of the sort of light sort
Yeah.
of what I was writing.
Mhm.
Um, if that makes any sense. So
Oh, it
yes,
does. Yeah,
quite a
100%. Yeah, no, absolutely. And talking about like writing about the setting, Las Vegas, talking about taking the good with the bad. Would you say that the idea of writing about the setting would be more important for like the mystery thriller genre than it would be for the romantic dramedies where it's more focused on the relationship? Like when you were writing Summer's Blood, Slipper Girl, and even what you're working on now, does the setting of like Las Vegas and where the sort of the nitty gritty comes into it, does that kind of play a more prevalent role than it would have in your first series?
um, I I think the short answer is yes, because I feel as though Las Vegas in this new series is in itself a character.
Okay.
and and it is influencing a lot of what goes on. And so in a very, very different way, um, I immersed myself in the first three books in, the sort of LA, advertising culture. I mean, all of that I made up, of course, but it was a little more fun. Somebody had commented, I think it was one of my writing partners said, um, when they started reading and working with me on Summer's Blood, they said, "Gosh, this is a far cry from that sort of stylized setting that they were in." Like this, and I pulled one of the main characters from the previous series, who is actually the protagonist in Summer's Blood, and it was putting him in some really gritty situations that were not in any way. Like if you went into the first series, you'd be like, "Oh," so it was someone called me out on that. I was like, wow, this is, I never thought I'd see him here.
But
So,
it sounds interesting though, because like you have in the in sort of the genre of like romantic dramedies, like everything's kind of, as you mentioned, it was very lighthearted. you know you're able to
there was
sort of
some grit. There was some
some grit.
grit,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
not like what this
of
is.
course. But then, if you take like sort of what Las Vegas is really known for, like, it's romanticized, the bright lights and everything like that. It's almost as if that kind of fits into it. And then when you sort of like strip that back and you look at the sort of nitty gritty, it fits, so that fits into your second genre. So it's almost as if it's just kind of both sides of it are like perfectly placed in each series that you've written.
Absolutely, I agree. Definitely, it is a great setting for a mystery thriller is to be in Las Vegas. Uh, and so, yes, the two books and the Neon Diaries are in Vegas, and the third book will also be. Um, Maybe I'll move them somewhere else for the beyond that, but or I don't know, but yeah, it does the environment and the setting does lend itself very well to this type of story.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. And something I'm curious about with series writing as well is a lot of people I've spoke to have said that once they get the first book down, the rest of the series, in a sense, kind of writes itself, or at least is a lot easier to write. And so, but something I'm curious about is surely there's a lot more backtracking that you have to do when you get to your second or third book because there needs to be a lot more consistency when you get to that point because if someone was to like read something, they could he's very easily find a plot hole if it doesn't make sense compared to like the first book, for example. Like, so obviously you do your research for every single book, but do you find that when you're writing like your second or third book that you are really kind of calling back to your first and second to make sure everything is as linear as can be to one make the story make as much sense as it can, but also stop people pointing these things out, I suppose would be another way of looking at it.
So the best way around that, but linear, oh my goodness, yes. What's so funny is I have a critique partner who I've had since book one, day one, and uh, what's hilarious is when he's reading, working with me on a new novel, he'll actually go, "Well, that can't happen because in this book, because he's read all the books," and I'm like, "Oh my goodness, you're right." I, I you're right. I forgot that that's what happened. And so yes, I have to go back sometimes and make sure that this falls in line. And not that anybody would, most readers aren't going to be like, even if they've read the whole, they're not going to be, but it matters to me because those details, the authenticity, the background, and the thing with series that is so cool is your characters have developed over now 5 books. So some of them have been there the whole time,
Mhm.
and they've evolved. They've gone through whatever, and now they're the same person because you always need to make sure that character is consistent. It's actually easier when you have so many books because you can go back and say, oh yeah, this is absolutely how this person would handle this dialogue in this situation. They would react to this scenario because I've had 5 books with them and I know who they are really. But it is a little bit of a balance to make sure that all of the early details that I've put out
Mhm.
there are considered and I make sure that I'm not just coming out of left field with something that
Yeah.
like, oh, that could not have happened. But yeah, it's a good thing because I'm sure most writers have partners who will in the writing process call them out on certain things, and I'm lucky with that because I people will be like, yeah, no, it's very funny.
Yeah, and it is interesting because that's like the sort of those are the times that as much as you want nothing but positive good feedback on your work like that, those are the times you want somebody to really kind of pick out the details. Like a friend of mine proofread my book that's coming out soon as well, and now he's a good reader. He loves reading, especially like nonfiction and the odd fiction, and I was fully expecting him to tear it apart, like out of love, of course, but just because. But no, I was like totally surprised, and I was like, serious, like what's going on here? This isn't right, But of course, at that point, you need that kind of feedback because you know you're creating something you want it to be 100% in your vision or as much as close to that as possible because well it's your work, it's your livelihood in some ways as well. It's a fascinating experience to say the least. So when it comes to story development versus character development, obviously there's a lot of overlap between the two things. Do you have a favorite out of the two that you like to write about?
I love character development, but in mystery thriller, there has to be a significant amount of plot driven.
Hmm.
It has to be, I think, in essence, plot driven.
Yeah.
So the plot has to really make sense. It has to have twists. You have to lead the reader down the path that you want them to believe, and then have it turn and them to be very surprised by what happened. And so that requires a lot of outlining and
Hmm.
pre-planning. I mean, again, I outline heavily, but my outline changes quite a few times in the process. I mean, I think in Summer's Blood, I wrote the ending and rewrote it like quite a few times. But that said, having it be plot driven, I don't want that to be. I like to have rich character development because
Hmm.
I feel like it is so important for the reader to identify and be a part of this character's development. So they're both really important. The genre kind of lends itself to plot driven, it should be, but I never neglect the characters because that really is my favorite part of
Yeah.
the whole process.
Of
You can come
course.
up with some amazing, interesting, fascinating people.
But
It goes back to the daydreaming, right?
yeah, exactly.
Watching people observe, be a very careful observer of how people say and talk and do, and it's fun.
Yeah, and that's what I love about it because you know those two things like character development and plot development. Like I mentioned, there was a bit of there's an overlap with them, but each one can influence the other just as much. But I mean, I'm by no means am I a fictional writer, but surely like is there an aspect where if you kind of sometimes lean more into one, the other is almost forced to change because we kind of have to keep them up with one another, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting because when when the plot goes in a certain direction, and it could go in a direction that's outside the outline or something that I never intended for it to happen, but it's just a better idea, right? There's always a
Hmm.
better idea. But yes, the plot can influence the characters absolutely, and in a does all the time. Um, and I have times where I'm writing and the plot goes in a certain direction, and it gives me an idea of how the character will develop, or not develop, or not,
Hmm.
how they will, it's a, but yes, they are constantly influencing each other. And I've actually had beta readers come in and say, gosh, I really didn't want that to happen. With this one, I didn't want that. I was sad because and I'm like, well, okay, if enough of my beta readers tell me something, I might make a change. But it's 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 kind of like, well, that was kind of part of that character's.
Yeah.
It was their arc. It was where they had to go, and
See, that's quite the conundrum, that isn't it? Because, like you say, that is sort of it suits the character arc. It's there wouldn't really be much more of a story for them fitting in with the plot, but that's the thing with fan favorites. It's like they're so sad to see them go, but they also want to see more. So what do you do with that? Do you kind of like cater to what the beta readers are saying, and especially if that character does become a fan favorite, or do you maybe kind of put a pin in the character and maybe there's something else for them in the future? Who knows? Like, I think that's one of the sort of more amazing things about storytelling is because it's such an infinite scope as to what can happen. But in that particular instance, that must be such a tough decision to kind of make because you could have everything 95% done and you're happy with it. It's just obviously getting that initial feedback, but then any changes could really kind of be a lot, really. It could really lead to like a big snowball.
absolutely could end up being a big snowball. But this particular thing, and it happened towards the end of Slipper Girl, actually, right in the denouement of Slipper Girl, and I took the feedback, I made a few changes, and all it was really, I didn't change what happened, but I
Mhm.
changed the way it was presented so that there was a chance that that could be different in the next.
Of course. That's that
So,
that's
so
a
you
s
were
that's
right.
a smart way of doing
You said put a pin in it. You were absolutely right. That's what I did.
it. Phenomenal stuff. I love that. I love that. So, Slipper Girl, that is being released on the 2nd of March, correct?
That's correct.
So, how and obviously this is like your fifth novel coming out, but how does that sort of feel when you're coming up to the release date, especially considering this is your fifth go round with releasing a novel? Like, how does the feeling sort of still stay the same, or is it more replaced with excitement at this point?
It's excitement, it's nerve-wracking, it's and that part of it is with every novel
Hmm.
because let's face it, we just don't know how
Yeah.
it'll be received. Even if you have beta readers that say, "Wow, that oh my gosh, I love oh, this was so good." You just don't know. You
Yeah.
just don't know. And so that's the part of it that is nerve-wracking, right? Because it's our baby, it's our soul, right? You have a book coming out right after mine a couple
Yeah,
days
and
later.
I am
It's your
terrified.
first.
My first, yeah, I am terrified. Like I am so, and I know I'm maybe focusing on the wrong things, but for me, it's that first negative review that I might get. I'm just like, oh my god, like bracing myself, even if it might not happen. I don't know, but the
Oh,
nerves are there, you
so
know.
empathize with you, right? It is nerve-wracking because it is part of our soul. It's a piece
Yeah,
of our
hundred
soul that we're
percent.
putting out into the world, and we don't know how it's going to be received, but I think it'll be fine for you.
I hope so. Thank you, but I hope so.
Yeah, the first one, man, that's exciting though.
Yeah, oh no, I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. But Adele, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on Behind the Camera podcast. Thank you so much for your time, sharing your story. And I very, very much look forward to the release of Slipper Girl as well. And just for the interest of the audience as well, before we wrap up, where can the listeners find you and the rest of your works?
Well, you can find me at adeleroyce.com. That website has links to all my books. You can read about them, and they are on all channels and will be on Monday, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all that. So adeleroyce.com.
Amazing stuff, yes. And make sure you definitely give Adele a follow, check out her works, and check out Slipper Girl when it comes out literally as of this release tomorrow. So, once again, Adele, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much. It's been a delight.
And there you have it for episode 89 of Behind the Camera. Massive thanks to Adele Royce for her time and for being this week's guest. Her newest novel, Slipper Girl, is available from the 2nd of March, so be sure to check that out. Links in the description. Massive thank you to all patrons. Your support is truly appreciated. And as always, if you'd like to stay connected with Behind the Camera, you can also find all of my links in the description, including socials, merch, and the pre-order for my upcoming book, Behind the Camera, The Journey So Far, releasing on the 5th of March. Thank you for listening, for the support, and for being part of the journey. Until next time, take care, stay creative, and I'll see you soon. But until then, peace.